So.
You're going to know Gary Weiss's
You don't want to see my hands.
column.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay, we can try. Yeah.
April gave me the,
I did agree to
you want me
civility.
the time?
I don't know if we'll need to.
I believe you voted for it.
I'll just shoot the three.
You voted against it? Oh, all right, go
It's a
ahead
fun
with the
task
hand
for me.
signal.
You're a good timer.
I'm just gonna put it on right now.
That's my job for 2 weeks.
Who's gonna start the? Did you start the video? Okay. Nice.
Hey, Bobby.
I just had to
Really
check the
close
last
enough.
slide because I
You're moving a little closer to me.
adjust your microphone.
Here, let me get that
Bit
for
by
you.
bit, Bobby, I'll be sitting next to you.
We'll call a meeting to order. Board meeting for January 14th, 2020. Would you please stand and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first item is to make any adjustments to the agenda. I have one that came to my attention previously. Under County Attorney, add D, tolling agreement for airport runway extension for County Attorney. And I think Brady, you had also indicated to.
Yeah, it's a Firewise agreement, service agreement amendment. You could make that 7C.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Okay, all those in favor, aye, hand up.
Aye.
We'll go into the public comment period. Thank you for coming. We usually read these guidelines prior to public comment, and please try to address us with civility. That's something we've adopted, and that means to us as well as others. Speak to the commissioners, please, when you do so. At this time, the public are welcome to address the county board in any matter of county concern. When invited to speak, please speak into the microphone for clarity. Sign in. State your name and address and the topic you are addressing. Members of the public may speak respectfully for up to 5 minutes. I will sort of do a poll here and see if we're going to modify that. We might try to adhere to a half an hour, but I would, as chair, have the prerogative to extend that if necessary. At the board's discretion, the board may agree to schedule matters addressed during the public comment period or on the current board agenda or at a future board agenda. All discussions must be respectful in nature and must be directed at the board, not at other members of the public. So just to get an idea how many would like to speak, would you raise your hand so I can... So we have plenty of time. Okay, we'll stick to the 5 minutes then, limit, and our vice chair will be timing each of you, and if, when the time's up, I'll ask you to just summarize your statement.
Can I ask a question? For the refugee part of the agenda, is there going to be open comment at that time, or?
No, this is during the public comment period.
Public comment now?
Yes.
in other words.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's a good question. Yes, typically we do not have board discussion during the meeting agenda items.
I thought this would be a different, fall under a different thing.
No. Okay, so Brian, you want to come forward?
Handout for y'all. Hi, my name is Brian Hansel. I'm here as the chair of the Cook County DFL, and I'm speaking about the refugee resettlement that's on the agenda. So I just passed out a statement from the Cook County DFL on this, and I'll read it. The September 26, 2019 Presidential Executive Order on Refugee Resettlement requires the federal resettlement agencies receive written consent from localities before refugee resettlement occurs. If no action is taken on this matter, Cook County will effectively opt out as a resettlement location. Timely affirmative action must be taken to maintain our status as a welcoming community. In Cook County, we help our neighbors and support those around us unconditionally. Our door is open to those who need refuge. Immigrants and refugees alike enrich the communities in which they settle, and we are honored and grateful to have them part of the Cook County fabric. By welcoming the diversification of our community, we invest in the long-term viability of the county. Political unrest and climate catastrophe are creating refugees at an alarming rate, and everybody deserves a dignified home. We have the social responsibility to create the opportunity for others. Therefore, the Cook County DFL urges the Board of Commissioners to approve written consent of refugee resettlement in Cook County, Minnesota. And just as a matter of statistics, since this last summer, we did polling across the county, and we talked to over 700 registered voters in the county, and it was the fourth most important issue for them was pro-immigration. So I think there's a good cross-section of the community that's pro-immigration, and we gave them an opportunity of over 30 different choices of what their issues would be. So to have it come number 4 by a large number is important in this community. And then I'll take off my DFL hat and just speak from a personal side. You may or may not know that boycotts are already planned for the Bemidji area who voted against this. Now, I have a tourism business in the area, and I was planning on using Bemidji for one of my future photography workshops. I am not going to use Bemidji anymore. I'm going to boycott it, and I'm taking that workshop to Park Rapids instead. And I would expect that people will cancel off my workshops this year, and I'll lose business if you guys vote against this refugee resettlement in the area. So to sum up, again, there's that personal note, but ultimately the Cook County DFL, which is a large chunk of the community, supports a letter of support for the refugee resettlement. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, indicate by your hand up if you'd like to come next, Ann. Would you fill out your name, please? Thank you.
My name is Ann Swallow Gillis. I live and I work and I vote in Cook County. While I serve as transitional pastor of First Congregational United Church of Christ in Grand Marais, I speak today not as a representative of that church, but as a private citizen. I urge the county commissioners to vote in support of the executive order regarding refugee resettlement. Minnesota has a long, proud history of welcoming and supporting refugees who have fled persecution, war, hunger, and despair, and they desperately have needed a new home. I value the intercultural connections and economic contributions that refugees from over 100 different countries have made to our state. Years ago, as a young pastor in Northern California in the early 1980s, my congregation supported and successfully helped resettle a South Vietnamese family, the boat people. This experience both stretched and it changed our congregation. But more important than what people who have earned refugee status can do for us, it is what our core values compel us to do for them. The religious traditions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam share both common origins and common values. Helping those in need, particularly the stranger and the sojourner in our midst. The presence of newcomers in critical need of new homes and new lives often, though, challenges the ethical and moral limits of our communities. Sometimes we have to confront our own prejudices and fears. Yet I believe we can face those challenges together and be better for it. We can live into our shared values of openness, compassion, generosity, and radical hospitality. Our lives and our country, our county, can be enriched and strengthened by our welcome and resettlement of refugees. So I ask you to vote yes on the executive order on refugee resettlement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
My name is Rana Hansen-Lavore. I live in Grand Marais, and I would encourage approval of a positive vote for this issue. As a person, I like to help people whenever I can, and when I lived in Downers Grove, Illinois for a couple of years, about 8 years ago, I was able to work with a family who were refugees from Guatemala, and I spent about 2 years giving them rides, taking them places, helping them learn things, and really was very educational and fulfilling for me to do that, but it didn't take a lot of extra time or money. It was things, give them a ride to the grocery store or something. And I would be willing to help anybody who was resettled here if they needed that. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Brad Thompson, live in town, got a business also tourist related. I want to say don't vote positive for this. You can allow people to come. We don't have to have more rules upon us. We don't have to have the big stigma. Anybody that wants to help out people that are coming to the county, help them out. They can come. We're not saying they can't come. I just don't think we should be forced with any of this stuff. Right now, we have a lot of people in this county that are scraping to get by. We have people leaving the county because there's nowhere to live. This isn't a save the world place. I don't have time. Right now, all my supporters are out plowing, out working. They couldn't be here because they're busy trying to make a living. I guess I urge you to vote no, or just drop it, leave it alone, and it'll be a non-supportive, non-dead issue. It'll just allow it to happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Pat Campanero, and I live at 264 East Deer Yard Road. And I'm here today to urge each of you to vote to keep our county open and welcoming to all people.
Initially, I was going to stress the real economic and intellectual benefits we enjoy with immigrants and refugees as our friends and neighbors. Since economic development has been my passion and my work here for the last 6 years, I understand the need to have working people come and support Cook County. However, County Attorney Hicken has done a great job of putting all of those statistics in your packet today, and I urge you to really read them because immigrants contribute to our well-being. So thanks, Molly, for doing that. Instead, I ask you to consider this. Without the ability to immigrate to America, I and probably most of the people in this room would not be here today. My family came to America through Ellis Island from Ireland and from Italy. Like many others, we assimilated and we continue to contribute to our country, our county, and our neighborhoods. I believe we both have a legal and a moral obligation to protect people fleeing from oppression. Vote yes and allow us to continue to welcome people, regardless of their ethnicity, into Cook County. Like Paul Wilson told us many years ago, we all do better when we all do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
Next. Okay, back.
Hello, my name is Colton Thompson. I recently became aware of this issue as of this morning because I have not been paying as much attention as I should to the local politics. And I'm not coming here in support or against this issue. I'm just trying to kind of give you guys a visualization of what allowing refugees to come here represents. So I saw this YouTube video of this highly educated college professor, and he had a cup in front of him. And he said, this is how many people we have here, this is how many people we can take in, you know, so on and so forth. When we take in these refugees, the cup overfills. And what happens when the cup overfills? You can't help anybody. So then you're stuck with all these extra people and the ones you already have that you can't help. And it just doesn't work. I also have friends and family in other counties and cities within Minnesota that have had refugees come to their area. And, you know, some of them are very good, very hardworking people. They're trying to get out of their country, make a better life for their family, and other ones just don't respect the local politics. They don't respect the local people. You know, they're not educated in local politics, so these people would be living here, voting here, casting their opinions and whatnot, and they're not as educated as the rest of us. They're not, you know, they haven't lived here. They don't know what's actually going on. I guess I don't really have much else to say other than just please consider the pros and cons to this, because I could see this really hurting the county and the people within the community and putting us into a deficit, especially considering we're already well on our way there. Thank you.
Thank you, Colton.
Okay.
Mayor?
Good morning. My name is J.R. Smith II, and I am the descendant of refugees. My family immigrated from Ireland in 1867, attempting to enter through Ellis Island, and were turned away due to a feeling at that time of no more Irish. Persistent as they were, they continued north to Canada and were able to gain entry into Canada and become Canadian citizens, at which point they immigrated across Canada to Ontario and then down into Minnesota. Since then, they have been civil servants, they have been business owners, they have been husbands and wives, and they have assimilated, and now here I am. I'm lucky enough to be in Minnesota. I'm lucky enough to be in Grand Marais. And this is the future of a lot of these people who are choosing, or I guess they don't even choose, really. I mean, they apply for refugee status, and then they get it or they don't. I feel like it's not really our choice to say no to these folks. Or if we are to say no to them, think we need to give them a pretty darn good reason why. The American dream, I think, is something that should be open to everyone. And I think that all of us who are the descendants of immigrants and refugees from the past need to acknowledge that we are here on borrowed land. We are here as well, under conditions that are not ideal. So the humility to bring forward when we consider this, I think, is something that's very powerful. I think that it's something that has impacted every single one of us, and to a certain extent could be the future of our country and our county. So, with that said, I would hope that you would vote positively for this refugee resettlement executive order and consider our own histories as well as our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Good morning. Happy New Year. I haven't seen any of you since the New Year, and Ray people from Lutzen. And I am Scotch, Irish, Swede, and Norwegian, the granddaughter of immigrants from each of those countries. And so very thankful to live in America. And I wonder when Brian Hansel was talking about surveying 700 people and immigration was very key for them, if that issue was immigration reform, because we desperately need that in our country, reform of what our laws are. We want to have a country that is open to people who are looking for a better life. But to come here ready not to be on the dole of the county, state, or federal, but to come looking to work and assimilate. And we know that many of these refugees are not assimilating. When we look at our county and we think of our budget of $10 million, 20% of that budget is health and human services. I spoke with Commissioner Deschamps yesterday. Bobby, I so appreciate your prompt call back to me. I appreciate it so much. And in talking to him about this resettlement, he said each of you received an email from Molly yesterday. Molly, thank you so much for looking, okay, what are the real issues here with resettlement? And my understanding is that for anyone to be a resettled refugee, they have to live within 100 miles of the resettlement office. The resettlement office in our state is in the Twin Cities. So to me, unless there is a loophole, this is moot. I grew up in Bemidji, which is the county seat for Beltrami. That is one of the poorest counties in our state. So how sad that there are those who are canceling business conventions or whatever because of the vote of a county that is saying, we cannot afford this. Here we have a housing shortage of affordable housing. If there were resettled refugees, would taxpayer dollars be paid for groceries, for rent, for education, for health care? There is the reality of what can we afford. So, thank you so much. I surely hope that if there is any loophole, we are going to hear about it. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next.
I'm of two minds. I'm Pamela. I'm of two minds. My mother came over from England, so I understand fleeing a country in economic duress to come over here to start a new life. It's worked out quite well for us. Also, on a humanitarian level, I look at these people that are in the camps down on the borders and stuff, and I bleed. And those children that are isolated from their parents, it's a terrible situation. So yes, on a humanistic level, I would very much welcome refugees here, but I have a pragmatic side to my personality that wants to know, what are we looking at? Are we looking at one family, 2, 10? What are we looking at? Where are we going to put them? What's it going to cost? Is this all covered in your presentation, Lady Molly? Well, it would be nice to have some hard facts to look at, because as Rita mentioned, the tax situation here is driving people out of town once again. I mean, yesterday in the grocery store, overheard a woman saying, yeah, I'm listing my house because I can't afford to stay. And we're up here like at the end of the world, which is why we're all up here, and it's gorgeous in the winter, okay, but it's like the Twin Cities is 5 hours away. Who's going to make that drive on a regular basis, especially during the winter? So it's like the pragmatic side of this that concerns me, and I think that more information is needed before there's a definite vote, and the worst case scenario is that we table it, which offends no one and still keeps our options open. So that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Next.
Good morning, Commissioners. Gordon Salisbury, Hoveland. Happy New Year. Thanks to all of you for your service to Cook County in 2019, and thanks for remaining in your roles for the upcoming 2020. Ms. Storley, thanks for your role as chair in 19, and Mr. Bursheim, thank you for sliding into that chair for 2020. I believe 2020 is likely going to be a challenging year. I'd like to just take a moment to mention some items that I, as a taxpayer, believe should be at the top of your priority list as we come into this 2020 year. You've already heard from me about this first item, and to be brief and succinct, I decided to write my thoughts out for you. A new county administrator. And because it seems commissioners are intent on replacing the past administrator at this point on the timeline, we can all see and understand how explicitly important this task is. You all know, I believe, that a 12 to 24-month appointment of Ms. Rena Rogers would be in the best interest of the county for multiple reasons, and if constructed well, might be well received by Ms. Rogers. Given that may not happen, I urge you to acutely and with intentionality about this task, go about your search. If that first candidate presented is not a good fit for Cook County, do it again, and do it again until we have the right person. Just real quick, I would love to see Rena be in that spot for a period of time to help with transition. I know her personal timeline isn't 3 and 4 and 5 years, but maybe something could be made to help happen there. Number 2, I understand that the PILT funds, the Ty Blatnick, will remain unchanged for the next 2 years, pending a new assessment. That's good news. But as commissioners, we must embrace the idea that funding is likely to change. We've kind of gotten a reprieve on this, and the budget must reflect that possibility. Number 3, the YMCA needs to quickly become not such a burden on Cook County. Number 4, the county now has a new garage in Hoagland. The residents of this building, the county employees, and all county employees in all of our county buildings need to dedicate time each and every week on upkeep and housekeeping of these properties. I believe that the previous administrator used the poor upkeep of the Hoagland garage as a means to replacement prematurely. I want to thank Commissioner Bobby Deschamps for throwing a water bucket of common sense on the commissioner's pay raise discussion which took place last month. I cannot, again as a taxpayer, believe that this conversation's ever going to get any legs as long as the experience of the past 4 years under the previous administrator is still on us like a bad hangover. I'd like to congratulate Diane Booth for her leadership and her successful launch of the Cook County Warming House. I think that there lies a story of persistence on her part. Thanks to Diane for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. Anyone else? Mike?
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, citizens that are here and in the remote places. I'm Mike Carlson, live in Croftville. Been here for 22 years. I am the grandson of Michael, who came from Norway. I am the son of Carl, who came from Sweden. They probably didn't come as refugees, but pretty close to that. My mother was sort of a refugee. She was taken in as a small child by a Native American family, her relatives, so I appreciate the various kinds of connections we have in this community of Scandinavians and Native Americans. Let me share a few little comments about the refugee situation. Let's start with a simple poem, an 1883 poem, Emma Lazarus, called The New Colossus. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send them the homeless, the tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. The golden door, of course, is the entrance of liberty and freedom, and that's the poem which is on the Statue of Liberty. I've heard people concerned about the current limits of our services, jobs and housing. How could we open our doors to refugees and not hurt our own? Of course that is a valid concern, but should we close our community to the small possibility that refugees would be settled here? In my own life, our church, Central Lutheran Church in downtown Minneapolis in the early 50s, supported the Latvian community that was, in those days, we called, a rather negative way, DPs, displaced persons. A number of Latvians came to Minneapolis in that time and were supported by our church as they became residents and later citizens. There was an unfortunate side effect of that in that some of those people were particularly smart. Egan's and Via, classmates of mine in high school, probably put me out of the top 10 because they were there. Egan's and I went on to study at the University of Minnesota. He managed to stay there long enough to get a PhD and had a long time service as a electrical engineer, and he has now moved back to Minnesota recently. Really important kind of consideration. Are we to limit the chance that talented people come to America? The action of this county has reached well beyond our county. A message of hope and peace and understanding for the world. Final comment, I just read the novel Swede Hollow, which talks about the travels of a Scandinavian family from Sweden, of course, that came to Minneapolis, came to St. Paul about 1897. It tells a really painful story of how little people came to this country with and how they struggled to live in that particular community, which was, you would call a shanty town, right on the edge of St. Paul, very close to the state capital. and think about how people were rejected for being different. Sven Turnblad, the person who built the Swedish Institute, was a very successful businessman, had many Swedish newspapers. He built the castle basically on Park Avenue so that he could become part of the community, and the people wouldn't talk to him because he was Swedish. That's a very recent time in our history. I know very well my father worked for a Swedish construction company that was called Carlson Levine, and it was called Levine so it wouldn't sound so Swedish, because Eric Levine was really Eric Johnson. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Dave?
Good morning. I'd like to start out by pointing out that 1/5 of the American population is left-handed, and this is discriminatory by putting this piece of paper on the right-hand side.
We'll have to put it in the middle, excuse me.
It's okay, I'm used to it. My name is David Seaton. I live up the Gunflint Trail. I own Hungry Jack Outfitters. It's a tourism business in Cook County here, and until fairly recently was very involved in Visit Cook County. One of the big issues that we have in this county is staff and employees, and we deal with H-2B visas. People are constantly recruiting to try and bring people from all over the United States and even from other countries to come and work here. And if we have some people who want to come and live here and contribute to our communities and become citizens and abide by the rules of our nation, I think we should pay attention to that. So I encourage you to vote positively on this motion. I would also like to point out that this meeting started off with the Pledge of Allegiance, which ends with, "and liberty and justice for all." And that includes all the people in this room, all of whom are immigrants to some degree or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lori Rothstein. I live on Devil Track. I want to say that my 7th grade math teacher was a refugee. He fled Germany during World War II, and each year, through tears, he would share his story with his classes. And his story was one that was derived from hate, one of deep loss that many of us don't know, and one also of hope and belief in common humanity. Refugees are people who find themselves searching for safety. And just like us, they are artists, they are lawyers, they are teachers, they are parents, they are children, and they are entrepreneurs. And in Minnesota, did you know that more refugees and immigrants start businesses than people who are born here, at a higher percentage? Only unlike us, refugees, their fate, for refugees, their fate lies in the kindness and in the compassion of strangers. Today, with your vote, you can carry the message that my math teacher shared throughout the years, a message that all people matter, and a message of common humanity.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Nancy?
Good morning. I'm Nancy Seaton, and many people have spoken very eloquently today in support and encouraging you to vote yes on the refugee question in front of you later today. I really want to support everything they've said. We are all so very fortunate to be here and to think that we now want to take a vote or that it would be possible to take a vote and say no to others who are just like those who came before us. It would be very sad. I want to be proud of living in Cook County as a county who voted yes to accept refugees, and I hope you will do that today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. Anyone else?
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Greg Galen, and I live here in Grand Marais. And I want to apologize. I'm coming here unprepared today. And I considered not doing this, but I think this is such an important issue that I just wanted to see if I could wing it and see if I can put something together that would make a difference. So I've got some rough notes here, and I want to see if I can tell you why I believe we should vote in favor of refugees and immigrants in our country. I don't understand everything about your job and how you do it, but I imagine that not everything we do here for the county has a big moral component or a huge moral imperative. And I think there are probably a lot of decisions you make, say, like the custodial situation at the YMCA, where when you make a decision, it's not going to mean, a lot of people aren't going to wind up getting killed over it, even if you get it all wrong. And you'll have a chance to do it over again sometime. And but there are other things that will come before you as a board that are going to have much stronger implications for the world around us. And I believe this is one of those situations. We're telling people who we are, and we're taking a moral stance that will leave an imprint on history. And we're throwing our weight into a tug of war. Frankly, I believe it's a struggle of good versus evil. And this is one of those times in history where we come to something like a fork in the road where you can wind up on the right side of history, or you can take another direction, or you can try and go up the middle, and I believe you would just wind up on the wrong side of history doing that too. And I want to tell you why. I want to read you some facts. A very large percentage of today's refugees are forced to leave their homes on very short notice. They're often forced to undertake a traumatic and dangerous journey that they must endure, oftentimes with scant resources. They're often ruthlessly victimized along their way. Kidnapping, forced slavery, torture, and rape are commonplace. The Center for Victims of Torture tells us that as many as 44% of the refugees that reach our country are torture victims. 44%. Asylum seekers who arrive at our borders are often handcuffed, shackled, and separated from their families and treated like prisoners. Medical care in U.S. custody is considered to be substandard. I'd also like to mention that according to World Vision, around half of refugees are children. So this is how it is. How you decide on this issue today can make this a better country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
Good morning. My name's Tom Morse. I live off Devil Track Lake, and I'm here today partially on behalf of my wife, Linnea Morse, who's working this morning and couldn't be here. For the 5 years before we moved to Cook County, she worked in refugee resettlement at Exodus Refugee Immigration in Indianapolis, where she taught citizenship courses and English courses. It's difficult for me to speak this morning because the clients she served were some of the best people we ever knew. I'll share one story. A man arrived
from the Congo. He was in a citizenship class. He had been in the United States already for 3 months after being in a refugee camp for more than 7 years. He had gone through 5 years of vetting before being allowed to leave the Congo. He had been attacked several times in the camp. My wife wondered why he always kept his arm at his side, and it wasn't until 3 weeks into the class that he admitted his arm had been shot in the camp and he had never received medical attention. That changed when he got to the United States and because of the power of the refugee resettlement program in the United States. The refugee resettlement program 10 years ago was resettling close to 90,000 people a year in the United States. During the peak of the Syria crisis, when refugee resettlement was at its highest, it was approximately 120,000 individuals a year. During that time, not a single refugee was resettled in Cook County, and there is no evidence to suggest today, when we're resettling less than 25,000 refugees, that Cook County would ever receive a refugee. So we hear people in the audience asking for more information about what the cost is. And it's hard to imagine that the cost for the taxpayers of Cook County is anything more than zero. But the human cost of saying no to refugees means leaving people in camps, means sending a signal that Cook County does not believe those people are entitled to the same kind of care, compassion, and welcome that all of us have received. We're not talking about illegal immigrants. We're not talking about economic migrants. We're not talking about people moving for opportunity. We're talking about literally the most vulnerable people in the world. And to say no to them is unimaginable. It is not a value that Cook County holds, and it's not a value that I would want to associate with. We've already seen the boycott against Bemidji, and that is not a boycott I want to see in my town. Not because of the economic impact alone, which would be real, unlike the fear of the cost of resettling families that aren't asking to come here. But we have to know that there is a place of welcome here in our community so that we can look at our neighbors and know that we're on the same side, that we believe in basic human decency and basic human values. So I thank you for your vote of yes today. And I hope you will remember the story of the many refugees who've come here over the decades and have found new life in America that was denied everywhere else. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for signing in. Anyone else? Okay, then we'll close the public comment period, and thanks to all of you for coming up and expressing your values and comments and concerns. We'll move into the consent agenda items. I'd just like to mention that Rena Rogers is not here today. She's out of town on business, out of the county on business, I think out of the state. And Molly Hicken will be sort of sitting in for her if any of the issues come up that she needs to deal with. Get a chance to look at the consent agenda items. Would anyone like to pull any of these? Okay, then I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor, aye. Raise your hands.
Aye.
Thank you. I'd like to take a little time now as chair to continue the work that Jenny Storley did in talking about civility. We adopted a resolution in that regard, and I would like to just do a couple of handouts. You pass that down to the one, I don't know if it's this one, but I went through this and tried to look at how we could use these statements that we adopted in regards to how we conduct our meetings. And I would suggest too that I have ordered 2 books. This indicates that there's the simple tools have a certain number in this document, but actually it's based upon a book where there's 25 rules written by Forney, and the title of that is The Civility Solution. Is one of the books, or What to Do When People Are Rude. That's one of the books. And the other one is the 25 rules, for constructive and considerate conduct. And I would highly encourage the commissioners to read those books if you have a chance. With that in mind, I would like to pass out some thoughts. You could give them to Stacy as well. Oops. My printer, hopefully, got enough. One for Brady.
Yep, I did that.
Okay. So I'll just read this, and we'll open it up as the end suggests, for suggestions, comments, or concerns. These are the chair goals for board dialogue for 2020. The purpose of these expectations is an attempt to use the simple tools for civility in our board dialogue during public meetings. This will hopefully improve our collective communication skills and improve understanding of individual concerns or views. It is not meant to imply that our previous dialogue has been problematic, nor is it an attempt to force individuals to adhere to rules or stifle conversation. This is an attempt to continue last year's efforts by Board Chair Storley to incorporate the tools of civility in how we dialogue with each other. It is meant to be a work in progress. That means, we're not setting this in stone, but we're going to work on it. To be a work in progress for our board and the public regarding the adoption of the resolution regarding civility. It is hoped that we can walk the talk in setting an example for staff and the public. So I'd ask you to consider these things, and I'd put the category that is one of the items in the civility document. Under pay attention, I would ask that you speak through the chair. This means putting your hand up if you want to speak and waiting for the chair to say it's your turn. And if this doesn't work, we could use a talking stick or something to pass on to facilitate that. The other category is listen. And in order to listen, we need to allow other people to speak without interruption. Pay attention, stick to the item on the agenda. Under pay attention, save side conversations until breaks or end of the meeting. And that's also for respect. And then the last one, respect. Ask that you respect other people's views, which means refrain from making negative sounds and or making negative body movements when someone else is speaking. It's called suggestion squashing. Please wait till they're finished and then express your point of view respectfully. So this is a work in progress. I'm not looking at it as rules. It's something that we'll strive to get better and better at. I really believe, in my experiences, that continuous progress is an important concept and that we work toward things in that manner. So this is not an agenda item, but I wanted to throw it out for any discussion and comments or concerns that you have about this, but I'm informing you that this is my goal as we go through the meetings this year. So I would entertain any comments or... Yes, Heidi?
Thank you very much for letting us know your intent and how you're going to conduct meetings. It's very helpful.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so here again, it's not a formal adoption, but certainly I would like to make it noted in our minutes. So getting into the agenda, we have DDA Consulting, and we have been informed because of the weather that Gary Weiss could not be here this morning, so Commissioner Mills is trying to dial him up on the phone, and if this works, we'll do it by phone the best we can, and then the intent of this is to listen to his presentation.
Brown Associates to speak with the municipal finance.
I programmed that.
Hello, this is Gary.
Good morning, Gary. This is Myron Bursheim, and we just started your agenda item. but I would just like to mention to the board that we will be listening to your presentation, and at the end of that, we can, well, I think, let's take it, you had 3 parts to this, is that correct, Gary?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, so I think we'll just take each one and then sort of discuss it and see if we'd like to add anything to it, or maybe we could approve it. And so, are you comfortable with that, Gary?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so I'll just turn it over to you. At this time, let's talk about the first part of this presentation. I'll let you introduce
Well,
it.
just thank you for the opportunity to visit with you by phone today. Travel was going to be a little challenging both on the way up last night and potentially on the way back today, so I appreciate this very much. So the first item to talk about today is the profile document that was included in your board packets. So hopefully you've had a chance to review that. As you can see in that document, it puts forward information that is of interest to candidates, both about the position and the community. I'd call your attention to the second to last page of the profile document. It starts at the top, it says desired administrator attributes, and then administrator goals and priorities. Those items were taken specifically from the meetings that I had with you all and with your leadership staff when I was up there in December. So that information, that's the source of that information, if you will, were those individual and group meetings that I held that day, which I found to be very, very helpful. So with that said, I guess what I would suggest is for you to provide any feedback or any changes that you'd like to see made to this document. I'll listen.
Okay, so should we go to then administrator core duties? That's your question, correct?
Well, actually, the whole document, the any changes to the entire profile that you'd like to see made.
Okay.
You know, if we put something in an error, or if you just want to make an enhancement or improvement. So really, the whole document of the profile, the brochure, if you will. That I'm interested in feedback on.
Okay. So is everyone comfortable with the profile as far as the information about the county, community?
If there's small inaccuracies, should we just let you know about that now or later?
I would say now. Later is fine as well. Our plan will be to post the position tomorrow, so we will want this document completely, tidied up as soon as possible.
One small inaccuracy is in regards, let's see here, we are on the second page of the county and its communities.
Okay.
And it talks about the Grand Marais Art Colony. It no longer has a glass studio. I believe. Yeah.
Okay, so the line that's after printmaking studio, a glass studio should be removed.
Yeah.
Okay, I have that.
Anything else?
And I haven't been involved with creating a profile before. I thought it was humorous just explicitly saying that it's the world's largest freshwater lake, but I realize that the goal of this profile is to kind of make us look good, so I guess that's something to tout. Not that we had anything to do with it, but.
True, you didn't, but yeah, it is something to highlight though, absolutely.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Heidi?
Under administrator core duties,
Okay, let's go. Yeah, thank you, but could we go ahead now and just say the information is in the profile is all right? Board, anyone else, we'll just give tacit approval if not. Okay, so let's then go on to the core duties. Thank you, Heidi. Go ahead.
One of the items is administers and interprets labor contract provisions, hears grievances, research and develops negotiation strategies, proposals, language, and cost. Is any of that changed because we now have an HR director? It seems to be correct.
I'm looking at the job
Molly?
description right now. No,
Steph-
that's still in the job description.
Okay.
The draft job description, which is, I think, okay to leave there personally, because there will be times when they are involved in all of those things.
And I'm comfortable with that.
Okay. Anything else? I found it suitable.
The other thing I'm just wrestling with is I'm a little uncomfortable with the desired administrator attributes. I'm not, I agree with them.
Excuse me.
Yep.
Could we just?
Oh, I'm
go
sorry.
Piece by piece.
Yep.
Thank you. So anything else on administrative core duties? Can we go ahead and say that's fine to go out tomorrow? Okay, very good. Okay, now, thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's none of them that I disagree with. It just, and maybe we need to be explicit. It just seems I'm a little uncomfortable with be patient. I mean, I guess that's something I do expect and, or have good judgment. It really seems obvious. Maybe just it was maybe in your interviews it came up strongly enough that it's worth mentioning, and just so an applicant is aware of our emphasis there. But I just wanted to talk about that amongst the board and get your perspective on it too, Gary.
Okay, Gary, do you want to respond, or do you want to hear from board members first?
Well, I could just say that did come from my meetings there. So it was articulated to me as being something important. Whether it rises to the level of appearing here or not is your call.
Heidi?
How do we determine that and quantify it in an interview from an applicant? Gary?
So, much of what is written there is not quantifiable necessarily. I think that these are somewhat broad statements about, what does this ideal candidate look like? A lot of these are going to fall under the category of being hard to necessarily quantify. I think the thing to keep in mind when looking at these types of statements are, this is the message to the candidate pool, and if it's important to say to the candidate pool, it should appear there. If it's not, it should not appear there. I wouldn't worry too much about quantifying what is written there. I mean, it's more of a outreach and a recruitment tool.
Okay, anything else? Jenny?
Gary, this is Commissioner Storley. I'm wondering if some of these could be put together in a longer sentence. Maybe patient could go under be honest, trustworthy, transparent, and patient. Some of them, they're kind of, the PowerPoints are kind of short. Maybe some of them could be put together and the list wouldn't be so long.
Okay, any other comments on that?
Possible.
The suggestion is to add be patient to the be honest, trustworthy, transparent, and patient.
I had a similar thought, and then I thought it all fits on one page so nicely that why mess with it? But I had the same exact thought. The other thing I was trying to wrap my head around was just it seems unprofessional to list these, but I guess where I'm assuming we're coming from is it's setting the tone, and my concern again was about the quantitative, and this is more of the qualitative side of things, and so I've wrestled with this, and that's where what I've come to, and just want to make sure that's how everyone's seeing it too.
Yes, I would agree if I could, excuse me, go ahead to Heidi first.
I agree with Dave. One of the items that I wrote down was the last one, be passionate about Cook County.
And I was sitting there looking at it going, are we honest to God going to hire someone whether or not they're passionate about Cook County? But then when your Be Patient came up and he answered that, I'm following along with you in the lines of this is just a tone that we want to set. Some people don't know about Cook County, and after they get here, they have no other choice but to fall in love with us. But to have them fall in love before they get here is not necessarily a reason to hire or fire. Because how can you not love Cook County?
If I could just comment too, I think this sort of sets the tone, as you mentioned, Heidi, and it's just giving a sort of a message and a quick list of this is what's important to us. And I think sometimes bullet points are really good. Quickly can be referred to, and it has something to do with looking at how people interact with others as well. Okay, any other comments or changes for desired administrator attributes? Are we okay with that going out tomorrow? Yep, okay. All right, so we'll just go forward with that. Administrator goals and priorities. Comments, questions? We're all okay with that? Okay. So we go on to the announcement. Dave?
Gary, this is Commissioner Mills. How did you come up with the salary range?
That is your established salary range, 2020 salary range for the position based on your schedule.
Thank you.
I did look at some other comparisons and felt like, and you recently updated this a few years ago, it's certainly in the ballpark for salaries, but this is your established salary range for the position.
Thank you.
Okay, Jenny?
Commissioner Storley, where will you be advertising? You want to refresh our memory on that?
So I will do some of that from memory here, so I probably will leave one or two out. We will advertise with the Association of Minnesota Counties, the Minnesota County City Management Association, the League of Minnesota Cities. We advertise with Hamlin, St. Cloud State, and other universities in Minnesota that have masters of public administration programs. The position is posted on LinkedIn. Emails are sent to city and county managers from throughout the state of Minnesota. We also send the advertisement or post the advertisement on the International City County Management Association. That's called ICMA. That is a go-to for anyone looking for a job anywhere, really anywhere in the United States for this type of position. We also advertise in Iowa, Wisconsin, North Dakota, and South Dakota in their municipal associations like the League of Minnesota Cities or Association of Minnesota Counties. So that's most of them. I may have left something out, but that gives you a flavor of the scope of the advertising that we do.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on position announcement? Yes, Dave?
Gary, it's Commissioner Mills again. Does the ICMA kind of take the place of NACO as far as the outreach nationally is concerned, or is NACO another avenue?
Yeah, we don't use NACO generally because I do feel like ICMA is the superior national advertising venue. However, if you wanted to add NACO to the list, we certainly could. It's just not been a practice that we've normally done. But I'd be happy to do it if that's of interest.
I would think so. I don't know if there's a disadvantage to that. More outreach is better.
Any other thoughts on that from others?
Can add it.
Okay. Let's go ahead and add that then. Heidi?
Gary, this is Commissioner Dukirk. I also had some questions about the salary range, considering that the news last week was that you can manage Taco Bell with a six-figure salary. How many other counties are currently seeking an administrator, and is our wage scale competitive?
So I think your wage scale is competitive if you compare to similar-sized and situated counties in Minnesota. In fact, what I found was yours was on the upper end. Now, there's always the argument that it could be higher in order to attract more people. And I guess that's a tough argument, because asking a recruiter like me what the salary should be, I'd be like, well, if you set it at $500,000, you do well. but obviously that's not appropriate or rational.
Well, lucky for us, we're not competing with Taco Bell.
Range, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, lucky for us, we don't have a Taco Bell, so we don't have a lot of competition.
Okay.
Yeah, there's Taco Bell in Faribault, and I suspect they're not paying, where I live, I suspect they're not paying six figures to manage it. So, I mean, I think some of that news gets inflated a little bit, but I mean, in looking at other counties and other similar situated, you're definitely highly competitive with them.
Yeah, and 85 is actually lower than what we hired our first administrator at, so I'm comfortable with this.
Okay, anything else on the position announcement? Okay, then let's take a look at the rest of that is in our documents as a county. The search timeline, this is a draft, and I guess nothing's etched in stone, but it's good to have a timeline that we can try to follow. So any comments on that, Heidi?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Dukirk again. Why is there such a long period between selecting finalists and the background check? It's from March 10th to March 24th.
Yeah, so the background check generally takes a couple of weeks because we are doing comprehensive criminal history, civil court history, verification of education, verification of employment, motor vehicle records, credit history, and sometimes that goes really fast and sometimes it doesn't. So generally we try, and we're also doing reference checking, and this is on all of the people that you're bringing in to interview. So generally we try to allot 2 weeks for that process, even though in some cases it moves a little bit faster than that. But it does take considerable time to gather and assemble that significant background information. And so, yeah, some firms do it differently, where they just do a background check on the finalist that is picked by the board. We do it on all of the people that you bring in for interviews, because the last thing that we want is for you to learn information after you've made a decision and say, well, now let's do the background check, and then something comes out and you have to look at a different candidate.
So the March 24th, yep, the March 24th is the completion of all that, not the start of it. That's where I was confused.
Oh, no, that's the completion date for, so you'd select finalists on March 10th. The background work would be done on the 24th and forwarded to you, commissioners, on the 24th or thereabouts, right around there, sometimes even a little earlier. And then you'd have a week to review all that information as well prior to interviews.
Okay, and that makes sense. And then under follow-up, it says April 2021. So does that mean you're going to give us a year of your time to, check in with a new administrator?
Yes, it does. So, now checking in with the administrator is remotely done by phone.
Yep.
But yeah, I follow up with people for the first year. And just as an aside, whoever you hire, unless they come to the job with a lot of county administrator experience, whoever you hire would be eligible for that AMC Pathways program also, which is a orientation, if you will, for new administrators throughout the state. So that's another piece of follow-up that would be taking place.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Myron.
Commissioner Mills?
Gary, it's Commissioner Mills again. And so, is 2 weeks enough for a background check? I know for various, law enforcement in particular, it takes longer, maybe it's just more thorough. You have experience in it, so I'm just asking.
So this is not the equivalent of a law enforcement check. They require other things that are not required as part of this process or for other positions.
Yeah.
For example, I mean, like a psychological evaluation, et cetera. So this is not the same background check process that is followed when a law enforcement officer is hired.
Right.
The rules are different for those.
So 2 weeks is enough time.
It is for what we do, yes.
Okay.
Anything else? I have one question. On the decision, you have county board will select candidate for offer, and you mentioned March 31st. Is that a board meeting, or is this just sort of a general, what's the significance of will select?
Yeah. Probably too strong a word, to be honest with you.
Yeah, thank you.
The day.
We'll consider
March
selection.
31st is the tentative interview date. So you would interview candidates that day. And quite frankly, because you have all of the background information before the interview date, it is quite common that the county boards make a decision on the same day that the interviews occur. But it doesn't always happen that way. So, yeah, I should soften the word. It's not will, it's could. It's a better way to describe it. In some cases, in fact, I just did a job in the county where they ended the interview day and said, yep, we're going to get back together in a week and review this again, and that's what they did. So, will is the wrong word.
Yes, I think if you could change that to more tentative in nature a little bit.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? So we can go on with that. So I guess to make it official, I'd entertain a motion to go ahead with this process as indicated, and they'll be in our minutes.
So moved.
Okay, Heidi moves.
Support.
Support, Jenny. Any more discussion? Okay, all those.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Could I just make sure that, we didn't specifically go into, we talked about the primary duties of the position, but that job description is a rewrite, and I just wanted to clarify it. Is your motion inclusive of that?
Yes, well, yes, I thought,
Changes
I thought that was something we had developed.
Yep.
Thank you. Yep, okay.
Okay.
So all those in favor of going forward with this search, indicate by saying aye and raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Very good.
Thank you, Gary, so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you
Gary.
all. Appreciate the opportunity, and we will be moving forward with the posting tomorrow.
Sure.
I'll make all of the changes that we discussed here today, and we'll be ready to go forward.
Commissioner Mills.
Yeah, Gary, Commissioner Mills again. And if we have individuals who are interested in the position, we can give them your office number here, and is that the best way, or email, or?
Either way is fine, but yes, please do refer them to me. I've actually had, we have this on our website already as coming soon, and I've actually had some good conversations with potential candidates already. So yes, if you are contacted or if you have potential people, please steer them in my direction, and I will, directly reach out to them, or they'll be, contacting me. But absolutely yes is the answer.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gary. I look forward to working with you on this. Thanks for all your work.
Yep. Thank you all.
Okay. Okay, we'll go to item 5, Sheriff, which I think Ben is here to make a presentation on the NG 911 dispatch phone system, and there was, we're looking for approving this contract for $100,731.40. Morning, Ben.
Morning, thank you. Yeah, so basically I just wanted to come back. I know we talked, I think, a few months ago about this project and working on the contracts. There's been quite a bit of back and forth between Central Square
And our office, County Attorney's Office, the interim county administrator, and also with IT, really making sure the contract is going to work for the county. And I think after quite a few back and forths, we do have, I think, a really good working contract for us for this system. There's actually, once it's signed, and they'll do what's called a site visit. They'll actually come look at our server room, look at all the equipment that that we would put in there, and we actually built in an opt-out of the contract in case they come up here and it's just not workable. When the contract first came out, that wasn't an option, and that was a really sticking point for us, is they wouldn't come up here until the contract's signed. We were concerned, we signed a contract for $100,000 that we can't fulfill, we're kind of stuck. And so working that part into the contract was very helpful, I think, from our side of things, and they were willing to work with us on that. The other part of this I did mention in the report was a grant. We've been approved for the grant. I'm still waiting to see the actual contract information. The hard part is if we sign this contract as part of the agreement, I believe we would already receive a bill for $11,000 to start the build-out process. And with that grant, until the grant is signed, we will not get reimbursed for what we pay ahead of that grant signature. So I kind of have two concerns. Was, I really want to get moving on this system. I believe our current system it's still working, but if we have any major issues, the chances of having that repaired could be an issue as well.
Ben, if I could just ask you a question.
Sure.
In that context, are you suggesting that we consider tabling this for another meeting? Would you know more? Would that be worthwhile?
No, what I'm thinking is, at least on the front end, we're not spending a lot of the money.
Okay.
And so I'm hoping, within the next few weeks, that we get that contract information for the grant, come back to you, hopefully get that approved and signed. And so we may lose out on a small amount of that grant reimbursement, but I really am concerned about waiting to get the system working.
Okay. Commissioner Dupree?
Ben, what if we made the motion pending grant approval? Are you still concerned about the timeline?
I am. We're trying to do this jointly with Lake County, and part of this contract, there was some savings involved by them. When they make a trip up to do the site visit, they're going to do a site visit at Lake County and Cook County, kind of back to back. So trying to keep our timelines together so that they're not spending more money coming up. And same when they actually do the install, they're going to do the install at one county first. Once that's live, they'll be coming right to the next county and continuing that process. So they're not spending more money making multiple trips.
Okay, then I think we'll go forward with making a decision on this project.
Yes.
At this time.
That would be
okay. Thank you. Go ahead, if anything else.
Just wanted to come back and just see if you had any questions going through the contracts, if there were any concerns that maybe the county attorney could answer for you as well.
Okay, so let's open it up. Just, if you want to comment, just raise your hand. And Bobby?
Everything looked good in the contract with you and Rena went through it?
We spent a lot of time on this contract, and yeah, I'm pretty confident that it's the best we're going to get.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anyone else? Brady and then Dave?
I'll just mention that the full cost of this was budgeted in the bonds. So we will, grant or not, we'll have enough money. So this will, so we don't have any, immediate cash concerns either way.
Thank you. Commissioner Mills?
That was largely my question, and I do appreciate you talking about the shakiness of the grant, but that answered my question and concern. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Then I would entertain a motion to, No other comments? Okay, thank you. Got to watch my eyes here.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Appreciate it all.
So I'd entertain a motion to go ahead and approve the contract for $100,731.40.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second?
Support.
Okay, Bobby, support. Any more discussion? All those in favor, aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Well, I know all of you are waiting for the next agenda item, but I think we're going to take a 7-minute break.
Thank you.
And come back in 7 minutes. So the magic number is an hour and a half, and it's break time, and we're close to it.
I think they're waiting for the Fairways Amendment.
I think so.
Is what they're really here for.
Birthday announcement.
Is it somebody's birthday?
Oh, we got our thing, that's what they're there for, right?
Yeah, that's the real reason.
I think that could come up in the end. I can make a statement there. I've never seen that. I should have financial knowledge from speaking, but that's the board's decision. That's where I think things went wrong. That is the board's decision, it's not the county administrator's decision, so that's incumbent on us by our authority to deal with those issues. So I would see that as being part of the search at all.
Well, I think in the former case, he came up with things and assured everybody that it was activity when in fact a lot of these.
I didn't necessarily agree with that. What those board's decisions, we abstain, but it's the board's decision. He didn't decide anything. He only provides input. My point being, it's well taken, and I think you got a good point, but it doesn't belong in a search.
Yeah, she really stuck to her gun. I don't like Soren or anything either. I don't even know if he's officially in it. We made 600 pounds. Well, I think it's a file, right? No, I think it's
Probably do.
I was going to make my own sign and put it in my yard, which I think next time around I will.
Well,
Vote Dave Mills, basically your kids.
Well, my own.
I gotta go to therapy.
They figure your shoulder out?
That doesn't work.
Details.
physical therapy, then I got
Oh, I could have been doing this whole time.
28 hours.
I'm like,
Pardon my.
there's nowhere to plug in down there, you know. Would you like to use my extension cord?
Oh, that's pretty handy.
Yeah, there's nothing down there. I had to ask for a special connection, which I'm willing to share with you.
I'm supposed to have a shovel.
Got the end
Thank you.
piece.
I will.
You fit in there? Use that one. There you go.
That just seemed greedy. Use
That's why it's here.
one.
That's why it's here. There's also a surge protector in the closet. It looks very, very cool. A surge protector, if you need to extend it, but it looks like you have plenty of cord.
But I'm concerned about blocking it, Ray. I don't know if I can keep it.
Cord, so I can have one at home. And you just here transport and.
I'm going to get some coffee, just a minute.
Plug into my socket there.
If I may.
You may.
I
I
think
have plenty
they
of
must have been
spots.
shoveling this morning.
It only took me a year to ask for another adapter.
It took me 5 seconds to say, listen, I need power. Because I'm demanding.
Oh.
Talk to Tim. Talk to Tim at
We'll call a meeting to order again.
Oh, I was talking to him after the big MPR thing last week.
Right.
Oh, I didn't see it.
We'll move on in the agenda to Thank you. We'll move on to the attorney. Consent required for POTUS executive order on refugee settlement. I'd like to mention that I did pass out a letter from the Public Health and Human Services Advisory Council that was given to me before the meeting, so please include that in your information as well. And thanks again for all of you that came this morning to talk about this. So I'll turn it over to Molly Hicken, our county attorney at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll note that in the audience, we also have the signer of this letter, Roger Linehan, I believe the chair of Cook County PHHS Advisory Committee, and we also have Allison McIntyre, the director, who was gracious enough to be here at my request. Because this issue was also addressed at their committee meeting, and there was discussion there, and of course, Allison's department would be in charge of administering certain funds to refugees as a flow-through agency, essentially, for federal and state funds. So I prepared a PowerPoint presentation today, and it might seem like overkill, but I knew that there was great public interest in this topic. And when I first introduced it in December, Commissioner Mills had asked that I do some more research on the issue before it came to the board again. So that's the purpose of the information that I put in the board packet last week, the memorandum and attachments that I sent to you yesterday morning by email, and of this PowerPoint. You'll see a lot of the information repeated in the PowerPoint, but I'm just trying to make a concise version, hit upon the most important points, and also have an opportunity to display that information to the members of the public who have an interest. So, the executive order issued by President Trump does make a change to the rules regarding resettlement of refugees. Prior to the issuance of that September 26th order, any refugee could be resettled in a county if the circumstances were right, without it ever having to rise to the board level or have a consent signed by the CEO or county administrator for the county. So if Cook County had been deemed appropriate last year and we were under the right conditions, a refugee family could have been settled here without even the knowledge of the full board. But the executive order changes that. And it establishes an opt-in consent process so that refugees may not be placed in jurisdictions that have not offered consent. Should I be pointing this at your? Okay, I just had to turn it on. There we go. So how do we issue consent? It needs to come in the form of a letter signed by the CEO of the county or county equivalent, and that in Minnesota would be the county, and in our county would be the county administrator. That consent must be unconditional. It can't be conditioned on either limiting the number of refugees resettled in the jurisdiction or the nationality, race, religion, or other protected class of the refugees resettled. It must be an unconditional consent. In social media and response to this issue and statewide and nationwide, and in discussions I've observed on the topic, there seems to be some misinformation or misunderstanding about what a refugee is. So I wanted to address that. A refugee enters this country with the assistance of and the permission of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Office, and with the permission of the United States Department of State Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration. So these folks have been screened and given permission before they cross the border. An individual who enters the country first and then requests permission to stay because of hardships in their own home country, that would be an asylee seeking asylum in this country. Different category of individuals. So, and this executive order is not related to asylum seekers. Refugees are legally within the country with permission. A refugee, by definition, has been persecuted or has a well-founded fear of persecution on account of their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group in their home country. They may be resettled by international organizations and governments to a third country to obtain permanent status and protection. So once they are in this country, there is a path provided to them, a path to citizenship. And refugees are legally within the country, as I mentioned. Just wanted to touch on the effect of this consent. This consent only relates to the initial placement of individuals by the Department of State and Resettlement Agency. After placement in any county, which now requires consent of that county, refugees have the right as any citizen in this free country to travel or relocate to any community that they wish. This next point, the third bullet point here, I've seen information going both ways or heard conflicting information, so I'm not certain of this next point, but I think it was a Minnesota Department of Human Services document, I did read that the federal funding provided to support initial resettlement would not follow that individual if they were to move again, would not follow them to a jurisdiction unless that jurisdiction has not offered consent. So that is a potential risk of not offering consent. But again, I've seen conflicting information on that point. Affirming resettlement consent would not necessarily mean an increase in refugees resettled in Cook County or in Minnesota for that matter. You may or may not be aware that the executive branch, the president, is entitled to cap the number of refugees allowed into this country, and that cap has shrunk and shrunk over recent years. So because if this board were to offer its consent, no, that does not automatically mean an influx of refugees into the county or into the state. These are just some points that I gathered from a National Association of Counties webinar that I viewed last week. That webinar was broadcast nationally, and let's see, who was there? The presenters included Teresa Cardinal Brown, who's the Director of Immigration and Cross-Border Policy, of a part of the Bipartisan Policy Center, Andrew Viprek, Deputy Assistant Secretary, Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration, and then a representative, which is a part of the U.S. Department of State, and then Ashley Feasley, who's the Director of Policy for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, which is one of the 9 qualified resettlement agencies in the country. So some experts in the field. It was a really helpful webinar, but anyway, about refugee resettlement, the United Nations office first screens displaced persons and identifies and refers vulnerable individuals for resettlement. Refugees are subjected to multiple rounds of security checks and medical clearances before they are allowed inside the country. And persons who have committed serious crimes or who might pose a security threat are not resettled within the boundaries of the United States. That's how the system is supposed to work. And this is a graphic I lifted from the webinar last week, which just kind of shows the 3 steps. Identification, then screening and adjudication, then travel and resettlement. Just give you a moment to review that. The Department of Health and Human Services, this would be the federal agency, has a role in helping.
I'm sorry, could you just go back to the last slide? I was still on that part.
No problem. And we'll publish this along with the board packet, so it should be available online. Okay.
Bob, are you done?
The text is pretty small. This is I think this is slide 7 of the NACO webinar that I shared with the commissioners yesterday. Okay, Department of Health and Human Services financially assists refugees in their resettlement. So they manage grants to the states and localities for cash and other assistance. They provide the health and well-being related resources for the refugee populations and continued health monitoring. They provide assistance via public and private nonprofit agencies to support economic and social integration of refugees, including matching grants to nonprofit voluntary agencies, and additional supports for particularly vulnerable populations. And then they also host the Unaccompanied Refugee Minors program for resettled minors that have no family sponsors in the U.S. and required foster care arrival. So when refugees are initially resettled inside this country, they have services wrapped around them, essentially to help with assimilation and their success in the country. Specific to Cook County, there is no recent history of initial refugee resettlement in Cook County, and we have statistics to back up that statement. The rules require that any refugee is initially resettled within at least 100 miles of a resettlement agency office for that refugee to be, or for that area to be considered for initial placement of a refugee. And you've already heard it in this meeting, we are not within 100 miles. And the question was asked at the end of the webinar last week, if a county hasn't received any refugees up to this point, what is the likelihood a county will receive refugees for resettlement after providing their consent? The representative from the Department of State said there's no good answer for that. So I think I said earlier in this presentation that issuing your consent does not mean that there will be an increase in refugees resettled. But we also can't guarantee what the future may hold if you do issue your consent. We do know that because of this 100-mile rule, it would require the establishment of a resettlement agency, which I understand to be a formal and kind of drawn-out process. But one would have to be established, I suppose, in Duluth or somewhere. We have a question.
Yes, Heidi?
So with this request from POTUS, if all other 86 counties vote no or do nothing, which is a vote no, and the RA moves to Cook County, and the refugees go through every million loophole to get here, and we have a sponsoring family, and we build housing, and we do the other 500 things, can we then say, whoa, no, we don't want them, and change our vote? If the vote today is to give consent, can we, when we see the train coming that's going to derail us and ruin our community, can we say, no, we don't want it anymore?
So my analysis is that this consent can be revoked, can be
Excellent.
revisited, reviewed, and revoked. The executive order says that the consent or declining to consent of the locality and the state should be taken into account at the to the furthest extent possible, or something like that. I'm not quoting it accurately, but and any consent typically can be revoked. So
Okay.
I don't see any bar to that. The other factor that comes into it, which I think you alluded to, is what, for a refugee resettlement, initial resettlement to be approved, the community has to be appropriate for that refugee. There has to be housing secured for the person before they move. They have to be able to work. There have to be helpful signs of integration and assimilation within the community and within the individual.
Commissioner Mills?
Is there only one resettlement agency in the state?
I didn't.
We're getting there? Oh, no.
I didn't get I don't have that answer.
Oh, okay. I noticed it says of a local resettlement agency. Oops. So
I've read that
Versus a
there's several in
regional
the metropolitan area.
Several, okay.
Yeah, Catholic Charities, Lutheran.
Right.
I think there's 4 or 5 that I've read.
Yeah, that's what I thought there was 5 versus just the DHS,
Mm-hmm. The resettlement agencies are nonprofits who receive grant funding from the federal government. It's something like $2,160 per migrant, or excuse me, per refugee, in addition to the other funds that we've outlined here. But there are 9 resettlement agencies nationwide. I know that number. So this is my final slide. My job as county attorney is to help you assess the risk of any action that you might take, and not to make that decision for you, of course. My analysis is that the risk to the county of issuing consent is very low, and that's according to my research. Cook County hasn't had any refugees resettled here in recent past and will not under current rules unless a resettlement agency sets up an office nearby. And if anyone did have the goal to prevent refugees from becoming Cook County residents, it's not going to be accomplished by declining to pass this consent either, because as I've outlined, or as I've stated, once resettled in this country, a refugee has the freedom to move about and could come to Cook County anyway. And I'm not saying anyone has that intent to exclude, but if they were, this would not be the way necessarily to accomplish that.
Okay, thank you, Attorney Hicken. So any more questions from the board in regards to this presentation? Commissioner Duker?
And just, some of the confusion in the comment, we're not being asked to open a door. We're being asked if we want to close a door that's been opened, because at this point, we do welcome if all of the obstacles are met, so.
Any other questions for? Okay, so before us is decision whether we recommend that the commissioner, or we should, either consciously allow resettlement here or consciously decide to exclude refugees as indicated in the agenda. Yes.
Motion to have Rena write a letter of unconditional consent.
Second.
Okay, discussion on that? Yes, Judy?
Well, I thank everyone who came this morning to give their opinion. It pauses for me to think about many years ago when my parents took in some people from another country, and it made an impression on me when I was young. I moved on in life, and I helped resettle some folks from India. And living in this community, we're very giving, we're a very understanding community. If someone has health situation in their life, people put together a spaghetti dinner, the container goes out at the local store, and we all contribute. So I feel that we have an open heart and open mind, and a moral and a Christian obligation on my part to accept people if needed, and I think that we will, under Molly's direction with her PowerPoints today and what she gave us, I've been studying this for 2 weeks in regards to what other counties are doing, and I think that we could certainly, or I could certainly support the placing of people if it was dedicated to coming to our area, and we would do the best we can with folks who need help.
Any other comments? Bobby?
Yeah. I was out in Mahnomen this past weekend at a thing, and I was talking to some people from North Dakota, and I believe that their town may have voted against this. And, as far as I can see, this is my own personal opinion, this is an executive order to divide people. It puts us on the spot. It puts our community on the spot. We got a pile of emails in support of it. And on the other hand, the people that we talk to are the other way. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Just like the DFL party gonna boycott Beltrami County. I talked to Tim Sumner, he was one of the people that voted yes. The motion failed. That's unacceptable as a DFL party. Tim's a damn good guy. He's from Panema.
I don't think the DFL is going to boycott it. It's a separate issue.
Excuse me, I think...
Talking out of order, but I just want to make it clear that...
But that's coming from you at our board meeting. You represented yourself as the DFL party first.
I separated myself from DFL, and I said personally.
Yeah, but
that was the transition.
Excuse me, but I'm just call to order that, well, let Bobby...
everybody talks about being Christians, this, that, helping other, and then to make Beltrami County suffer because of 3 votes on the county board is a little ridiculous to me. Cook County is an interesting place. How many people here go up and associate with people on the Grand Portage Indian Reservation? Besides Roger. Can you handle another culture here when you don't go talk to the culture that's already here? It's there's a lot of unanswered questions. I'm not here to vote against this, but I am here to make people aware. And I think with that, I'll be done.
Commissioner Duker.
I just want to thank Commissioner DeShaw. You don't often say anything, and I know that this means a lot to you. So thank you for sharing your feelings.
Anyone else? Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, I see the issue from both a practical standpoint as well as a principled standpoint. And practically, I don't think it's going to directly affect our operations or finances, but out of principle, it's what our community values. And I've never received so many emails, and all of them were in support of this, and very proud to support the consent.
I would just like to comment from my point of view that I mentioned at a previous meeting, I was involved in this in Anoka, Minnesota in the 70s, and part of a refugee project with Zion Lutheran Church. And we were taking people into our homes until they could get settled, and I just saw the value of it. I also see this as, a symbolic thing for us, and so I, as a commissioner, I think, my intention is to be welcoming and care. I'm from, my grandparents were immigrants, and even though this isn't about immigration, I think there's certain groups that try to make it about immigration, and I think that's unfortunate, because it's just us going sideways with not getting to the point. And so I'm very supportive of it. I've seen the benefit of it, and it definitely represents my values and my beliefs that we should help those that are in need. Commissioner Starling.
To Commissioner Deschamps, I appreciate your comments right from the beginning. When all of our immigrant people came to the United States, whose land did they come to? Right. And in many instances, it was welcoming. I think about the West End, where folks came from Sweden, and they came to the land of the native people who lived here, and they all helped each other out, and I think we can do the same.
Anyone else? Okay, the chair will entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, there's been a motion and a second.
Excuse me, thank you. Long discussion. I appreciate that. So all those in favor of the motion and the second, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed? Okay. Passes. Item B, under attorney, 5 Botnick meeting in Washington DC. Molly, do you want to cover this? I've got some information I could share too, but you go ahead first.
Sure, I'll start. This item was added to the agenda by Ms. Rogers, but she's not here, and it does concern, potentially it concerns me. The Ty Blatnick issue that we've all been closely following, there was a change in December of last year, and we were contacted by Pete Stauber, who had worked out something, and that was alluded to earlier in the public comment. I just wanted to read verbatim an email from the Forest Service, which is the best formalization of this arrangement that we've got. It's what we have in writing at this point. And so this is Bob Luco, who is the acting regional forester for the Eastern region. He says, I can confirm that per a determination by the Department of Agriculture, the Forest Service will have a new appraisal performed to determine the fair appraised value of those lands within the 3 northern Minnesota counties that form the basis of payments required under the Ty Blatnick Act. The payment levels are established every 10 years, 2018 in this case, through an appraisal of market value. While this new appraisal process is taking place, the Forest Service will continue to make annual payments to impacted counties based on the valuation of the certified 2008 appraisal. However, if after completion of the new appraisal, it is found that payments made based on the 2008 appraisal exceed values established in the new appraisal, the USDA will need to recover those excess payments through future payment adjustments. So this is a good short-term solution, which gives us additional time. As commissioners are aware, we were contesting the accuracy of the 2018 appraisal along with Lake County and St. Louis County, and it appears that our efforts were successful in that they've kind of thrown out that appraisal and they're going to do a new one. and it maintains the funding as it was for a temporary time period. And I should say that we will get more than an email. I understand that the Forest Service is preparing a more formal correspondence that'll go to the 3 counties, but it just needs to go up through the layers of authority and be approved. The item on the agenda is related to a request that I think I might ask Commissioner Bursheim to better explain.
Okay, I think you're aware, and it's been mentioned before, that there's a group of commissioners that have been meeting on this. We have met with the Deputy Secretary of Department of Agriculture, and we've been meeting throughout, and typically that involves 2 county commissioners from St. Louis County, because they're at the meetings that I'm at with N Club, and Commissioners Fay from Lake County, and myself. And so we had a meeting a week from last Thursday about this topic, and the importance and the idea of going out to Washington, D.C. with representatives from each county, which would be some professional staff and a commissioner or 2 commissioners, if we wanted the expense, to have a meeting with the Secretary of Agriculture, Sansky, and Representative Stauber, and really make it clear about how important this is in the reappraisal process. This is a significant, I think, positive thing that's happened so far, and there was a group that gathered and said, you know, this seems to be most important for Representative Stauber because of his position and, quite frankly, relationship with the administration to carry this forward. So I give him credit for that. The reappraisal itself, by just opening it up, as Attorney Hicken mentioned, will sends a signal that we're going to take a look at those primary indicators that reduced appraisal, and revisit some of the issues of the value of this before it became the boundary waters, and that was the law. So I'm somewhat optimistic based upon the meetings on this, but anything's, you know, still probable, and the probability might be good, but things can change. This meeting request came from Representative Stauber and from the Secretary. I think it's going to have some positive impact in Washington, D.C. So we have set up a meeting for January 22nd, that there would be a group that would meet down in Lake County to talk about this further. The purpose of this being on the agenda is to get approval for funding, and there's 2 different scenarios that could go. It was decided that our county attorney would go, and I had volunteered to be involved in this, because the meeting was originally going to be scheduled for the last week in January, and now that might change. And one of the other target dates for this would be during the NACO legislative conference, very end of February. And so I would ask that we get approval for a commissioner, myself, if that's okay, to attend with Molly Hicken if this meeting is scheduled prior to the NACO legislative conference. And if it's done at the legislative conference, Commissioner Storley is already signed up to go and will be there, so it's logical that I would need to work with her and brief her, as well as this group, on representing us at that time. So I guess the approval would be for, you know, a conditional thing for a commissioner to go with our Attorney Hicken. And if that's scheduled during NACO, then we would have Jenny Storley attend because she's already there. So any questions on that? And then we'll get into comments. Yes.
Although I believe that Commissioner Storley is quite capable of representing us, you have been the point person in this process over the last year. And when I was board chair, we had situations come up where I was not involved in the previous discussions, but it sends a very strong message when the board chair is the representative of the county at the meeting. So although it is a savings to the county to tie Commissioner Storley to the meeting because she's already there, I think that the loss of $1 million is big enough that we can afford an upfront payment to make sure that you are the point person either way. I know that that's a burden on your schedule, but I would ask that you please make yourself available and that the board set the funding to make sure that you are the contact at the meeting since you have been the person in this from the beginning, if you would be willing to do that.
Okay. Yes, I think I would. Thank you. But let's have other comments on it, and then we'll see if we should take action. Yes, Commissioner Mills?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I had similar thoughts as Commissioner Dukirk. I was also curious about the more specific purpose, and who might best represent us for that purpose. As chair and having been more involved in this conversation, I would lean towards Commissioner Bursheim representing us, but I'm not entirely clear what Representative Stauber is looking for. So I don't know if anyone has any insight there.
Well, I could give you a quote that was given to me from, and
I won't quote you on the quote, but.
Well, okay, well, I'll get the intention of it. And I've talked with, Representative Stauber about this as well, individually. He made a statement that was passed through Rich Say, who has been working on this, and I really want to give him credit. He's president now of AMC, Association of Minnesota Counties, and he's been our real strong point person in working with Representative Stauber as well as the Forest Service. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into this. I should say we've had discussions, and Bobby, you were at a meeting, an intergovernmental meeting that I attend as well, and so we've discussed it there as well. So my best attempt at a quote is, he wants to have this meeting and get a lot of focus and attention, and so it will be a press event, I would assume, and it's to make it crystal clear the need for doing this in the correct way for these counties. And so it is collectively, it's about, and it's not about the boundary waters, whether we should do it or not. It's about what its value is. And the intention of the Thigh-Bottling is to provide public safety, public services, and infrastructure for those counties that gave up this land in perpetuity as long as it goes. So that, and the appraisal process said the criteria that they were going to use on your assessment process was changed, and we have real strong concerns about that, and we want to make that message clear, crystal clear, that this is a very important thing, not just for our counties, but for how we dealing with states or lands that give up their land for the public service, and so that's a big issue for us because it's a lot of area. And I think it's just due diligence, so, but I remember crystal clear. So how that dialogue goes, we'll know better after the January 22nd meeting, so. Okay, so I guess, any other comments or questions, and we'll go to a motion, I guess.
My family didn't give up its land, it was acquired differently than that.
Okay. Bobby, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to go out there. I think I brought that back at the last meeting there when we heard of the change in it. Commissioner Jewell and Commissioner Nelson, they also stated that, and Commissioner Gutermont, better get ready to go to Washington DC.
Yeah, I remember you said that.
So I think it's a good idea.
Yes.
I certainly would support you being out there if it's during the time of NACO. I do have my committees that I need to attend, the health committees. I would forego them if it happened during that time, but you have been part of this whole discussion the whole time, so I certainly would support that too.
Commissioner Dukert?
Motion to approve travel for Commissioner Bursheim and up to 2 employees to go talk to Stauber in Washington, D.C.
Okay, any support for that?
A second.
Okay, any discussion? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We talked about Attorney Hicken possibly going. Was there another?
Bob.
Assessor Thompson, yep. I think that would be an option.
Yeah,
Or is there other?
Well, I think it would be considered, and I can't speak for anyone else, but I guess it's a very wise, thank you for thinking of that if we have approval for it, then we have that option, whereas I think we would preclude it if we didn't. So thank you, Commissioner Dukert. I think that's a good suggestion. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's provided, and I would certainly think that there could be someone else going. Okay, any other discussion on it? Okay, all those in favor of the motion as stated, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Okay, for item C, bylaws establishment, there was a PDF on that, and we'll turn this over to Attorney Hicken again, in looking at how we're going to proceed with drafting and going through the process of approving bylaws.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item is meant to be the scope of, you can determine the scope of where we go with this discussion today. I suspect since we've already had a long meeting that we'll probably choose the smaller scope. But at the very least, what I'd like to come away with is what the Commissioner's desired method for review and drafting bylaws in a thoughtful and considered way would be. I have a recommendation in front of you to pull out a few sections of the bylaws to work on at every committee of the whole meeting. So that would limit the time that the commissioners spend on the issue to once per month. And with the hope that we could have a final draft ready for you to approve at the time that the new county administrator begins. I'm not sure what the consensus of the board is on this, but what my opinion is, and what I've heard other commissioners echo, is that we probably don't want to actually establish the bylaws until the new county administrator is in place, but we can have them all wrapped up and reviewed and in a draft that the commissioners accept and ready to enact once the county administrator comes on board. So the goal would be to have that final draft approved by the commissioners by May. I think you have options. If you wanted to devote more time to this, you could choose to do it at the committee of the whole, plus have another go at it at another regular board meeting in the month, or you could choose to work on it at every meeting. But the method would be, we would take 2 or 3 sections, as I've done for today's meeting, draft them. We're still going off of this Scott County model, but it's necessary that myself and the county auditor treasurer and the interim county administrator review and make changes and make this consistent with what we believe the commissioners would desire for board operation, and not just mimic exactly what Scott County did. So all 3 of us would take a go at those sections and drafting them in a form that we could then present to the commissioners. We present a draft with specific sections that I know I want your input on highlighted, but all commissioners would have a chance to read the whole thing and address any portion of it. I could bring not just the recommendation or the recommended language that I would draft, but also show you samples of language that other counties have adopted related to those topics. And just get going on this and move forward with it and hope to have it completed in the spring.
Okay, Commissioner Dukirk?
I would like a timeline at the next committee of the whole. I think we might have to add it to commissioner agendas because the February committee of the whole is already blocked off entirely for training.
For what?
For training.
For training.
So we might not be able to meet the timeline if we don't add it to board meetings. But we won't know that until we dig into it, so I would like some flexibility.
Any other comments? Commissioner Mills?
I think it sounds like the burden will be more on Attorney Hicken here and team to wordsmith and whatnot, and then I'd like for us as a board to be as aggressive with reviewing and editing as we can be, just to make that timeline happen. But again, it's a balance of getting as much as we can done versus getting bogged down, so. But that's just my general thought there.
Jenny?
I think some areas will go pretty fast. Other areas we'll have to dig a little bit more, but with her help, we'll be guided on that. But I think it's a great idea. We need to, it's time we do it.
Bobby, do you have any thoughts? Okay. Well, I know, I would just like to comment that I think it's like a work in progress, and we'll go through it, and I know that we took a look at Scott counties, and there was a lot of good information there, and so, but I looked at that and read through it carefully, and I started finding things that were not consistent with some of our issues here, so that gave me pause for the process a little bit. And so this seems to be a very logical and prudent and worth the time kind of thing, because we need to agree on this as best we can and work for consensus, I think, whenever possible. It's very important. So I think the quality of our process here is maybe more important than the timeline. But I think we should set goals and see how it goes. But I think it could go quite fast, because we have a lot of information out there, and good information. I know that Jeff Cadwell provided to us, so I think we got to start already. So, go ahead.
There was one, and this is maybe just for your process, Attorney Hicken, when it gets down to the actual text, the overview, section 1A, purpose, the first line, drafted by county attorney based on AMC publications, yellow.
Oh.
There's nothing in yellow that I saw, so I was.
You're right.
Or very little in yellow, so I thought it was very helpful, both to see the blue and the green separated,
The blue highlighted section is what I drafted. I changed my mind on the color, obviously, so, without changing that word. So
Blue.
just
Oh,
blue.
funny, okay.
So the blue highlighted language is what I've drafted based on AMC publications.
Okay, well, and yeah,
The green highlighted is the Scott County language.
Yeah, I gathered that the blue is yours, but then I was looking for the yellow as well, and so that's where I was confused. Thank you. Okay.
And I think it was good to provide, I had read this previously to, from AMC. That was a real good document that they spent a lot of time on, what county commissioner roles are, county administrator, and been very helpful. So I think, I don't think we're looking for any kind of motion to go ahead. It's just that I think, as you suggested, we'll proceed and monitor and adjust how it goes and do what we can to expedite the process, but also to be cautious and prudent and give it some thought.
So I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Mills.
Oh, I was just going to ask if we're looking for consensus on what's done now here, right? No.
I think this is just, what is
Yeah,
your
an
intention?
example.
I think it was to share information so far.
That's kind of why I mentioned scope of this discussion. If you want to get into the nitty-gritty of looking at this language that I've already proposed, we could do that at this meeting. Otherwise, I would anticipate covering sections 1, 2, and 3 at the committee of the whole, as well as proposing a schedule for drafting, as Commissioner Dukirk suggested, but it's your choice.
What do you prefer?
I think it would be best to address it at the committee of the whole.
I agree, okay. Everyone else agree to that? Okay, very good. And we'll go to an added agenda item, tolling agreement regarding the airport runway extension project, and it's dealing with attorneys and the law firm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the county has asserted a claim against RSNH, our engineering firm, related to the FAA's denial of reimbursement under our airport improvement program for certain funds the county paid for work performed during our runway extension project. As part of the claim process, the county and this firm, RSNH, may enter into a tolling agreement, which what that means is by agreement of the parties, it suspends the statute of limitations governing the county's claims, subject to certain limitations and agreed upon terms and conditions, for the purpose of advancing possible resolution of the claim and exhausting means of resolution of the claim prior to any litigation. Outside counsel, we're working with Freiberger and Stephanie Ball, Eric Johnson, who we've worked before with Ms. Ball, and she's very well suited to this work. She's good at what she does. Anyway, outside counsel recommends entering into such an agreement and requests county authority to do so. So the resolution that I'm asking that the commissioners pass would be to authorize outside counsel to enter into a tolling agreement with respect to the county's claim against RSNH and authorize appropriate county representative to execute that agreement. You can authorize the county attorney or the auditor treasurer.
Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it RS and H or RSNH?
RS and
Thank you.
ampersand H.
Commissioner Clerk?
Motion to approve assigning authority to the county attorney, and if the county attorney is not available, to also have signing authority for Brady Powers.
Do we have a motion to?
Second?
Okay, second. Any more discussion? All those in favor, aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, passes. Okay, we'll go to auditor in item A, Ty Blotnick, funding options and discussion.
Mr. Chair, this is just really looking ahead to the 2021 budget. As our budget's already set, and we got this information, we can't change our levy. And I tend to put things into numbers, so that's what you have here, but you really don't need the numbers to know the general idea is that we don't know enough to make any hard decisions, certainly not at this time, but just some of this will be repetition, but a little background. As stated, we'll continue with the current level of boundary waters payment for 2020, 2021, and then if the reappraisal is less than that, then we'll have to be prepared to pay that back. We won't know what schedule that is. And just a little background, right now the current payment, it's a calculated payment of $2,025,000. We haven't received that for many years since the crash. Of 2008 and 9, the federal government has sequestered part of that. So currently, 2019, we received $1,899,450. The next year's appraisal was reported at $1,273,500. Now, potentially, that would be sequestered also. I don't know. I haven't seen any documentation of that, but that's what that other number is. Reappraisal, what-if scenarios, if there was no cut, presumably we'd receive the same as we did this in 2019, $1,899,000, and just what if there was a 12% cut, a 24% cut, and a 37% cut, which is what we just heard this year in the appraisal. And then just shows you what the difference is in the second column and what we would be required to pay back. If, for example, we come back with the reappraisal and it's a 12% cut, presumably we'd have to repay about $455,000. Worst, let's call it worst case, if the appraisal comes back the same as what we saw earlier this last year, we'd have to pay about $1.4 million back again. Which makes, it's very cautious, I would say, in what to do with that additional funding, unless we know something about the reappraisal. So the next set of numbers is just showing our actual final budget. We put in the $1,273,600 that we were told the appraisal was. We get our regular PILT funding, and then we use this additional PILT funding, this one-time additional PILT funding that we got in 2018 and didn't know what it actually was until a year later. So that's what was in our budget, which is still short of what we had for 2019, 133,000 short, which is part of why our levy was over 6%. 2021, a possible budget is to use the worst case. We did get additional PILT 6902 again, if you remember, last June. Again, we don't know exactly what form that is. We're waiting. Presumably, we'll know about secure rural schools. We'll know what it is. I'm assuming here that it is all 6902. Presumably, we'll have that roughly $499,000 to put towards our 2021 budget again, which will help tremendously, but will still leave us short of what we've been getting for the 10 years of the BWCA payment, about $195,000 short. So that'll be the consideration. 2022, presumably, we will not get the additional 6902 money. Worst case, we have the same cut as our original appraisal last year. We have a great shortage then. But if we take this additional money, being cautious, and we put it into a reserve, potentially you could call it that capital reserve. If you see here, $625,704, these are all, very rough estimates. We'd have enough, we've put it all aside, we would have enough money to make the repayment in the worst case. And then hopefully by 2022, we will have enough information, though, from our reappraisal that some of this will become moot at that point. But again, it's wide open at this point. This is just telling you some of the thoughts we have going forward for the 2021 budget.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, concerns with Commissioner Clerk had her hand up first?
I have a couple of them. Do we ever get the sequestered money?
Not to my knowledge. It potentially, as we had that lawsuit nationally over the 6902, when that was short, there was a national lawsuit that actually restored some of that. This is not national. With the BWCA sequester, it's 3 counties. So you would say that would be a tougher sell. Why they're still sequestering it, since it was related to the crash of 2008 and 9, presumably, which is long over, why they don't do away with that baffles me, but yes.
And then the payback, since it's the federal government, I assume that they want the payback with interest?
we don't have any information on that at all.
We've had a discussion
We have.
about that, and that is the intent of it, yes.
With interest, yeah.
With interest.
So that makes it even more, let's say,
But that hasn't been, that'll be part of this whole process, so
Right.
where we're going forward.
you would then invest it and
Previous
keep track of
discussion.
that interest. Yeah.
But we would accrue interest if we gain more. So there's two sides to that.
So just to finish up my conversation here, I would say to be more conservative than Brady, not only would I like us to not put this in our budget to balance, but I would also like us to put it in a CD, lock it up, and earn interest to pay any possible interest that might come up. Or not. But that's it.
Okay, thank you.
I like that idea. I was trying to think of a way to
Lock it up.
to truly save it, you know, because changing the board can
Yep.
spend it, you know, just like it happened in the past. So that's a concern of mine, but I was going to ask if you are also, your office is also tracking this sequestered money? Is that an ongoing, or we only track money when we get it? Is that, or, I don't know.
It's in all of our bookkeeping, so it's easy to follow.
I'd be really curious what that total is at this point. And then I'd also be curious if that's something we can talk to Representative Stauber about, because that's the opportunity we have to get to the heart of that. These three counties are all affected by that, and these three counties are going to Washington. I was also curious if we thought it'd be advantageous for Brady to go to Washington. But I don't know if you have any interest or if that makes any sense. Just to talk, I don't know that it's if it's a numbers discussion or if it's just a
I doubt
larger
it.
discussion. So.
I doubt it
I
is.
think it's maybe more on strategy and messaging and, but, if I could just comment, you know, whatever we do, our board can always change later, so.
Yeah, it's.
But, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't do something, but that's how, I don't think there's any way we can prevent that I'm aware of. Unless we'll have to talk about that, but I think we'll know more after January 22nd, and maybe I could bring back a message from that meeting, as well as Attorney Hicken, and then who else might go.
Do you think the sequestered money discussion could happen? I mean, will you bring that up at the January 22nd meeting before?
Well, yeah, you know, it could be, but I don't know if it's going to be, I think this would have to be agreed to by, Representative Stauber, and it could be brought up, but I don't think we'd want to make such a big issue out of it that it distracts from our intention of going in the first place. But
yeah, it's just
that's just my knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, it just seems to be a large, I guess I don't have perspective on the size, the amount that we're talking, but it seems like a very relevant and significant part of the discussion.
Yes, but how to change it, I think that's the issue. We don't have a real avenue. They would have to pass some kind of legislation, otherwise it's under the authority of the President's office.
We're not asking them to change it, we're just making it part of the conversation to let them know that they've already kicked us where it hurts. So, we're already taking hits.
Okay,
That's,
thank you.
That's my point. We have history with them, and they need to be reminded of that. So however far back we go, push it.
Mr. Chair, and even if we don't look back, it would be positive for them to look at why they're continuing this and maybe just consider a change going forward, if nothing else. It's $150,000 a year. So.
Yeah,
We'll bring that up at our meeting on January 22nd.
I wasn't privy to the sequestered money, like that wasn't in the front of my mind with this conversation, so learning about that, I was just like, oh, wait, what? It's not 751,000 that we're being shorted, it's a different number because of that, so it's good to be on the up and up with everything there, so.
Up and up.
Upwards, onwards.
Commissioner DeClerc.
Motion to put the difference in the appraisal and original amount for each year into a CD.
I think, just a point of clarification, do you want a motion, or the intent was information, but I guess you always had the prerogative to make a motion, but I guess I want to clarify your intent of having this on the agenda.
I didn't ask for that, but I'm certainly open to that. Our plan would have been to put this into some kind of clear fund as we do with our bond funds, probably not a CD because of the flexibility, to tie it up for a specific period of time, but a money market or something like that at the Magic Fund most likely, but.
I'll change it to money market.
Okay,
I'll second.
Okay, we have a second. Then discussion.
Yeah, I don't know that I don't know that I'd be willing to support this, but I wanted to talk about it, and I think we just need to talk about it more, probably in the future. Some kind of strategy with this, something that's secure, but I certainly appreciate the flexibility as well. I just don't know that balance, and I trust Brady would know a lot better to come with a recommendation in the future.
Commissioner Duker.
Money market makes it more flexible so he can reach into it.
But it also makes it more, yes. But it also almost, so your intention is to make up that interest. Is
Have
that
it work
right?
for us and have it specifically separated and put in an account so that you can clearly see that we intentionally want to make sure that this is kept separate from other line items.
Yes.
Yeah, I would actually like the flexibility to come back to you.
Right.
With, we'll talk to our advisors, we have 3 or 4 of them, what's the best option for this? And that's
my comment was, I think it's a good intention, but I think we need to talk to our financial advisor and put this in the context of a lot of other issues. And I would ask, our auditor to bring forward something when he has vetted this more. Well, we do have a motion and a second, and I guess we'll vote on that. If you vote in favor of the motion, raise your hand. No, nay, raise your hand.
Nay.
Thank you. Okay, approved meal reimbursement rates.
Mr. Chair, currently our meal rate is 10, 12, and 15 for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We should approve that proactively. And the other thing, in our travel policy, we approve the federal rate, and I think it would be good to have that also in motion. The federal rate for this next year is 57.5 cents.
Motion to approve.
Okay,
Support.
support. Okay, discussion. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last year, and I think it was just in a committee of the whole discussion, but the idea was brought up about, or maybe it was at a regular board meeting, but the idea was brought up about using the GSA rates for meals, and I don't know that we looked into that at all. I don't know what those are. And if we could look into that this year, I think it would be worthwhile. That was my only discussion.
Do you think they'll be different?
They are very different.
I have no idea.
Like different as in lower?
No, higher.
Higher? Oh. Like dinner would be
What is it, Bobby, 25?
30?
Oh, okay.
It,
Excuse me, yes, go ahead.
it changes for a region.
Yeah.
Or city even, or whatever, so.
Yeah, for Minneapolis, it's 18, 19, and 34.
Oh.
Well, further discussions, Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, and so, so go to the GSA website, and you can put in your city, and I guess it doesn't make I would naturally want to put in Grand Marais, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because we're not claiming meals when we're in town, it's just when we travel, and so the question is, where do we travel most to? I guess, I don't know, for me, it'd be Virginia, I guess, but for others, it might be the Metro or Duluth, yeah, so I don't really know how to figure that out, or have an average of the places we go, or whatever, but it's worth talking about, I think.
Sure. Okay, Commissioner Duker.
As with other things, such as our wages, we have these discussions, and we say we should discuss it over the year, and it doesn't happen. Commissioner Mills, would you be willing to sit down with maybe Commissioner DeShaw and look over the information, since Commissioner DeShaw brought it up last year, and have the two of you work with Brady and bring it back to us for a suggestion or a recommendation for the 2021 budget?
I'm willing.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay, so I think we would, Brady, you have a comment?
Mr. Chair, do these items come up during negotiations,
What negotiations?
Labor.
labor negotiations?
No.
Okay, just curious.
That's a very.
Not yet, but now you put it out there. Thanks, Brady.
Well, from what I'm hearing, maybe we should have a motion to table this till a further meeting and have a report from Commissioner Mills and
No, I
DeShaw.
think Brady needs to have it to process.
Yeah, he was talking about the 21 budget, so.
Yeah, so we should approve at least currently, because we have to pay these as we speak.
I got you. Okay, all right. So thank you. So, motion to approve the current rate or past rate.
I believe we already have a
Yep.
motion.
And so, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, opposed, goes forward. And then we'll bring this up again for the
Budget
next year.
season.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, then the additional item was a request, because this work is going on currently, to amend a service agreement on the Poplar Lake Fireways agreement, just to extend the period from December 31st to June 30th of 2020 to continue that work. And that's within the funding for the Poplar project goes until September, so this fits within the funding period and allows the contractors to finish the job this spring.
Okay, discussion? Motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Forward?
And you'll change the name of the board?
Yeah, I've talked to Todd already, so we'll change the name from Ginny to Maureen Bursheim.
Okay, we have the administrator, and I think, is there anything else coming from Rena Rogers that you would have? I don't think there is, but...
Well, she wanted me to give just a preview of what we expect to be on the agenda for the committee of the whole. Would that be appropriate at
Yes,
this
then,
time?
thank you. Mhm.
3 items for the committee of the whole agenda on the 21st of January. As an aside, Ms. Rogers will be back in the office on Friday, and but we anticipate that with the help of April Zimmer, we'll get this agenda published to some extent, right, on Thursday? Okay. We already talked about bylaws and what we expect for that, so that's item 1. Another item would be a follow-up, kind of a report on the border-to-border discussion that was had at the Public Safety Committee meeting in November. We would ask that Kristen Foster be present and that Sheriff Eliason would be present. I think along with the board packet, some communications from both of those offices related to this topic would be included, but just kind of say what happened at that committee meeting. I believe there was actually I was there, and there was a DNR representative video conferencing into the meeting, and there was opportunity for public questions and committee member questions. So kind of a report and follow-up to that meeting. The other item would be to invite Bob Thompson, the assessor, to discuss tax classification options and any recent activity in that area, and give commissioners an opportunity to talk about that and ask any questions and let us know direction where we need it.
Okay, any comments?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Was public engagement an
I will
agenda
take care of
item?
that
Okay,
next.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay. We'll proceed then with those three items on Committee of the Whole meeting for next week. And that'll be sent out Thursday, correct? Yes, thank you. Okay. I will move on to Employee Concerns, Commissioner Concerns. I have an item here on public engagement planning. We've had two discussions on public engagement in our weekly leadership meetings, and one was with Jenny Storley there, and one was with Dave Mills there yesterday. And we talked about this at length, especially yesterday. And so I think from those conversations, we haven't really come up with any definitive topics, but we'd like to have it on the agenda today. And considering all the options that are still maybe could be vetted, I'm asking for your input on how we should proceed or not with public engagement. And I think for today's discussion, we'll talk more about should we do it or not. There's just a variety of topics that could be brought up, and and I think we'd have more topics than we'd have time. But I think for this first year, at least from my perspective as board chair, is that I think the question could be, should we have some quarterly public engagement meetings, like public meetings, somewhat structured, not just necessarily wide open, and try it this first year on a quarterly basis, so we would have, and quite frankly, the last one could be the Truth and Taxation hearing in December or November, whenever we do that. And so we'd have three others to plan for. And budget is a big issue, I think, that has been brought up in many varieties, and you know, how specific it should be, how structured it could be. I think we have to really talk about that more. But generally, I would like to put it out for your comments on the concept of going forward with quarterly meetings of public engagement, and then have more dialogue, maybe some more recommendations coming through the leadership team, as well as any committees or whatever, to plan the specific topics. And we'd be dealing with one coming up, I think, in March or something about that time, so we'd have a little time. So I would just like to open it up for your thoughts and comments at this point in time.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
And just to pass along a message from Rena, if possible, what she would like to come out of this meeting is some kind of direction as to how many meetings to schedule this year. If you desire to have them quarterly, then she would begin to schedule, find time and places for those meetings. And then also direction related to whether to continue to use the services of the Bureau of Mediation, and I can't remember the rest of that office name, but Mariah Levinson, to help us facilitate public engagement and find creative ways to make it more effective. So those are Rena's requests.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I didn't know if we're quite ready for that yet, but that's all right. So let's throw that in. So I think the idea of quarterly meetings, but public engagement in general, and then how do we structure them and who do we have involved? I think if you could comment on that. We all worked with Mariah during our performance review process and some of the board development process as well. So, Jamie, we'll start with you.
Are you looking at town halls? Are we looking at Commissioner Dukirk has the coffee with the commissioner? Are we looking at that plus a topic? That's what I'm throwing out, kind of, where are we going to go with a specific topic or a town hall covering many topics? More coffees?
Well, my response to that is I think if people want to individually as commissioners have coffee or town hall meetings, that's your prerogative and desired decision.
So we would.
So I don't think that was part of the conversation we've had so far.
Okay. So town halls are off the.
Well, I think that their locations could definitely be
Like we've
different
done?
places. I mean, but I think we'd welcome everyone.
Right.
But I think there's to me, there's two issues, and some others might look at it differently. There's town hall meetings that we would have outside of the budget process would be on our own initiative as commissioners.
Okay, different than what we've normally done. We've taken a team and we go to the different districts and
Yeah.
do that. It would be up to each one of us to do that? You're saying?
No,
Okay.
I think that maybe Commissioner Dukirk, maybe I can speak. Are you still meeting with your coffee and, go ahead.
I haven't had the last two meetings because they fell on holidays, but just in this discussion as it's going so far, it sounds like there's a lot of confusion about what we should do, and I think maybe we should have Mariah come up and get us to gather our thoughts together and come up with a plan. I obviously support public engagement because I've put my own time and money into having these meetings. So I'm not saying we shouldn't, but I think that we need a little bit of help to define what that is that we're going to do. And I think having Mariah come up and work with us and set the schedule would be helpful. I know you want to have more of them, and you've brought it up a lot.
Okay, any other comments?
Well, I was curious about the participation and results of your coffee discussions, but then I had something else I was hoping to suggest.
They're
too.
wonderful. We had the room full in there one day, and people really enjoyed it, and people have talked to me afterwards and said thank you again for taking the time and doing it. I think the information that happened at those meetings is important to us as a whole, and so I would like more commissioners to be present to hear what people have to say.
Thank you. Yeah, the other idea that I had, that I mentioned to Myron yesterday, was Commissioner Bursheim yesterday, was I was hoping to have three, I guess, here we go, trying to define what they're called again, but three town halls before the budgeting process really gets underway. And the three would be kind of the three main drivers of the budget, and that would be the Public Health and Human Services, Law Enforcement, and the Highway Department. And it would just be general overviews. They could be breakdowns of those departments' budgets. We will get presentations during the budget process. We could use this current budget just for perspective so that people understand a little bit more where the money goes and is spent and how it's used. I think that'd be very beneficial. I don't see the need for Mariah to facilitate those unless we want to change it up, but it's just the impression that I've gotten in more recent town halls that we've had, specifically the County Road 45 project, and as well as Fifth Avenue West, and as well as the jail discussion. I feel like they've been very productive and beneficial and helpful, and just getting information out there, and very civil. And I think if we just have more of those types of kind of presentations and then question and answer afterwards, it really goes a long way. And there's really great ideas from the public, whether it be tracking or accountability or efficacy of dollars spent, and just being able to have that conversation on a less formal but still professional level, I think is helpful. The difficulty there is fitting that in before the budget process really gets going, so. But one last thing. The quarterly aspect of it makes me less comfortable, and honestly, the truth in taxation, in my mind, doesn't count because it's, because of the legal structure it has to be. So I just kind of, it's important to get that feedback, but it's not as productive, and it's at the end of our budget cycle, so it's more frustrating than anything in my mind.
Commissioner Cooker?
I don't want her to facilitate our meetings. I want her to work with us to put our thoughts together of what kind of meetings we want to have and how we do those. I don't want her to facilitate them.
Thank you.
Yes. Because we seem to struggle with what we each want those meetings to have and what the point is and how we lead them, and she was really good at putting all our thoughts together and figuring out a schedule for us.
Anything else? I think to get this going and provide some kind of direction, and I think we need to spend more time in looking at what these topics are going to be. But I know I've gone on record publicly stating that I think we should have some kind of public dialogue, public engagement about the budget process early on in the formative stages. So how that really looks, I've got my ideas. Also, I think we need to work with our Budget Advisory Committee as well. But, so I guess I'm asking for direction on should we go ahead with public engagement and try to go forward with a quarterly design, and then we have some time to come back maybe through the leadership team or staff or any other person that wants to have input to pick the topic for the first one. And then, we could spend a little more time figuring out what's next. Or we could plan them all. Bobby, do you have any thoughts? Public engagement?
Yeah. I don't see why we need a topic to go out and talk to the public. I brought Kristen, and I think it's Kristen and myself, went up and met with the Hoveland Coffee group at 7 o'clock in the morning. I got great feedback from that. I'm planning another one to bring myself and Rena and hopefully Kristen up there.
Sure.
To update them on projects that are coming up in the Hoveland area in District 1. And, I think you just need to get out in the public. You have to have that communication with the people who you work for.
I would just like to comment, yes, I think we would encourage all commissioners to do what you're doing. I think this is, should we have meetings with the entire board there collectively, and I think that's the issue. So you're saying you would not really think that's necessary to have public meetings with the whole board there?
Well, I guess in some ways it would be nice, but, who picks the subject? What are we gonna, what are you going to bring to my district that they don't know?
I think these should be held for all people, It'd be similar to, the jail meeting.
Why we have the jail meeting again?
I don't know, we maybe could sometime. Okay, Commissioner Mills?
Yeah, I guess that speaks to my point about having a topic. Like, if you bring Kristen, it's about transportation. Like, that's the topic. And that's what I'm saying is, it's an efficiency of staff time. If this meeting is going to be about our highway department and anything in that, it doesn't have to be a particular project, but just getting that general overview. And that way, just Kristen would be there, or maybe Kristen and Brady, say, and Molly. But then if we have another one scheduled for Public Health and Human Services, Kristen doesn't need to be there, that would be Allison and some of her staff, So that was my thought on a particular topic, is just an efficiency of staff time and having focused discussion instead of everything under the sun, which is also important, but maybe not with a particular department head. So.
Commissioner Story?
Yes, to your point, Commissioner Mills, I have and represent townships, so I bring at various times speakers there to talk about an individual assessing or individual whatever. I also meet with individuals, groups, fika coffee, you name it. So I think a topic is good, to your point, during the budget time. The topic is good. Highway, topic is good for, all of these things. How we go about doing it, if we schedule it specifically, that would be important too, so.
Okay, to try to move forward with this, I guess I'm going to just do a poll and indicate whether you would favor going ahead planning quarterly meetings and pick the topic. We'd come back with the topic for this first one. We could bring that back from, we have the auditor and the attorney and administrator and two of us commissioners at those meetings, and we could bring back a topic for the first one. So if, I would just like to take a poll and then we could comment on that, if that's okay, unless you feel you need to speak before that.
I have a question about the poll.
Sure.
Specifically the quarterly, I mean, is that to make our time more manageable, or is it, like, it seems restrictive in when we want to get dialogue. The third quarter and the fourth quarter are not as productive.
I guess let's just go forward then and not say how many, but say, should we plan the first public engagement meeting and come back with the topic through more discussion and proceed from there. The poll was meant, if you don't want any kind of public meetings with the entire board there, then you would say, no, I'm not in favor of it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my question, I didn't mean, I don't think quarterly is a bad idea. It's just, I was merely asking the intention of the quarterly.
It seems logical, and it could be, as I mentioned, the last one could be the truth in taxation. And we'd pick 3 more topics. Commissioner Duker?
So the question now that you want us to raise our hand to or not is, do we want to have public engagement with the full board?
No, I think the first question is, should we have public engagement? And I'm suggesting planning on quarterly. Let's try that. Okay? So raise your hand if you'd favor going ahead with a public engagement process of the entire board, and attempt to do a quarterly schedule. Raise your hand. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Any other commissioner reports? Meetings to note? And then, January anniversaries. Commissioner Clerk, thank you for all you do with this.
All right, we have Nanette Ahrens at the highway for 9 years, Michaela Klingman in soil and water for 3 years, Leah Ekstrom in the attorney's office for 5 years, Jamie Green, who you can all give him a big clap and a hello out there in front of our scanner, 2 years with the Sheriff's Department, Andrew Hayes, also 2 years with the Sheriff's Department, Martina Johnson, 13, lucky number 13, upstairs in Public Health and Human Services, Holly Schroeder, 21 years in our recorder's office, Brian Silence, 20 years in our maintenance, Judy Sievertson, 2 years with the Sheriff's Department, and I would just like to note that she also had 28 years working for the Sheriff's Department prior to leaving and coming back to us for the 2. Brody Smith, 2 years in land services at the recycling center. Mitchell Travis, 3 years in our land services. Our wonderful screen monitor and extraordinaire of keeping us all in order, Miss April Zimmer. Thank you for your first year. I'm glad you didn't quit on us. And then I am so super excited about this last one that was added, because I don't think it was on there last year.
Kami and Eddie, woof woof. Thank you for 2 years at the Sheriff's Department, and thank you, Deputy Spry, for being Deputy Eddie's partner. And since we all heard howling on WTIP at one point, I'll just keep it to 2 barks.
Thank you. I just want to, I missed meetings to note, we'll be at the AMC Legislative Conference, February 25th through the 27th in St. Paul, and there will be a quorum there at that time. With that, I believe I will adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Someone moves? Thank you. Adjourned.
So moved.
Have fun.
The long and short of the court for me is like, I don't know when it's gonna happen. It's like, yes, let's do it, let's do it.
We gotta move.
Yeah, yeah.